right, joining us on Hot Copy today, we have with us former Senator Laila De Lima. She's the spokesperson for the 16 complainants in the first impeachment complaint filed against Vice President Sara Duterte. Senator De Lima, attorney, good morning to you.
Good morning, Karen, and good morning to all the viewers of Head Start. Karen, before anything else, may I just correct you that it's actually a total of 17 complainants, not 16.
Oh, thank you for that. All right. So 17 complainants. Let's start first with how the 17 complainants all got together. The question is, was there a third party that influenced all the complainants to file this? Did all the 17 complainants know each other? How did this come to be?
Okay, if you notice, Karen, the list of the complainants, they are actually from diverse civil society groups. And then they are personalities who we can say are active observers of political developments in our country. They watch the hearings in both Senate and Congress and House of Representatives, the Quadcom, the Committee on Public Government and a Good Government and Public Accountability. They read the newspapers. They really observe the political scenario, the developments in our country. So these are diverse civil society groups members because they are filing it or they filed it in their personal capacity. So there was a sort of the meeting of minds. They discussed and they've been, they're so bothered by what is happening. They're so bothered by the actuations, the behavior of VP Sara. So they got together and discussed this. And there was even, because I was there in the very day that the complaint for impeachment was being finalized and the signatures were being affixed, and as well as the verification pages were being signed by these complainants. And there was a healthy discussion, spirited discussion, but there was hardly debate in the sense that even if the various scenarios were explained to them, even if certain risks and odds were explained to them, there was almost unanimity. The dominant sentiment was really to go ahead with that, because by that time when they discussed and finalized everything, there was already the statement from the president discouraging impeachment. But in spite of that, their decision, it was really a firm decision on their part, because the sense was what we are doing or about to do is we think is the right thing to do. And about the timing, we also think, when else? Because there was this recognition also of the fact that they were actually waiting for the House itself to act. Because, they're the ones really very knowledgeable about those disclosures in the various committees, the budget hearings, and the Good Government and Public Accountability hearings. But so when they noticed, and there were some announcements or pronouncements from individual legislators that, as far as they know, no impeachment is being cooked in the House of Representatives. So that's when they decide, because they know they have the right to do so.
Okay.
To file.
All right. Okay. So I interviewed Francis Aquino D yesterday, and he said that the 17 complainants who filed are all doing this in a personal capacity and don't represent their organization. Yes. Is that correct for all?
Yes, it's understood that they signed the complaint in their individual capacity, although some of them are really from certain groups and also even from party lists. But they'd rather that they would sign it in their private capacity, because there will still be the emotions or the need to get consensus from their respective groups, because there are internal processes to be followed and there might be divergence in views. So they decided, it was very clear to everyone, they're doing it in their own personal capacity as taxpayers, as voters, as citizens of the Republic.
All right. Now, in the complaint invoked 24 articles of impeachment under at least four grounds. Let's talk about each
Yes.
ground and what do you think is the strongest evidence to impeach the vice president?
Insofar as the complainants are concerned, among those they think are strong enough and viable grounds that may be adopted and affirmed by the House through the committee are ground number one, ground number two, the unaccounted 125 million OVP confidential intelligence funds of 2022, also the failure to account 500 million and 150 million OVP DepEd confidential intelligence funds of 2023. And then the unliquidated 7 billion cash advances in DepEd for 2023, that's Article 7. And before that, there's Article 6, she left DepEd with 12 billion disallowances, suspensions, and charges, as disclosed by COA itself during the hearings. And then the hundreds of millions unexplained receipts from drug lords from 2007 to 2015. That's the accusation of former Senator Sonny Trillanes. He filed a complaint and he also testified before the House of Representatives. And hundreds of millions unexplained receipts from drug lords, 2007 to 2015. That's Article 11. And then Article 12 is the unreported assets income in the Sal N of and in her Sal N. And then we have, of course, the extrajudicial killings in Davao City Mayor. Although many are questioning that, because actually in all of the articles where there are allegations referring to certain acts on her part, while still a city mayor. But then in the minds of the group of complainants, they think that it can help bolster the other grounds pertaining really to her acts during her actuations during her being of the OVP. So it shows the lack of mental and even psychological fitness and the overall unfitness to continue to hold such a high office as the office of the vice president.
All right.
And several others.
Yeah, and several
Yes.
others. Let's go back a bit to history. You were a senator for 6 years, and then when
Yes.
Duterte came into office, that's when charges against you were filed. So for 6 years, you're very familiar with the workings of the Senate in terms of budget requests, confidential funds. And during that time, were you a senator when the late Chief Justice Corona was impeached?
Oh, I was still the DOJ secretary.
Okay, DOJ
I
secretary.
became a senator in 2016. Yes,
20
DOJ
Yes.
secretary.
Kaya ko to binabalikan para matandaan ng tao that Justice Corona was impeached for less. Justice Corona was impeached
Yes.
for less. In the end, 200 million pesos was found in his personal bank accounts, which Justice Corona then said, right, that he had earned it, not in a corrupt manner as alleged during the hearings, but he claimed it was from his private practice. Regardless, he was impeached for less, right? So let's
Yes.
start with this. And you have, of course, former President Joseph Estrada. The impeachment did not go into full fruition, but he was convicted
Yes.
eventually, right? Of plunder,
Yes.
also for less. Also for less.
Yes.
Oo.
Yes.
So comparing the Corona issue that he was impeached, Estrada who was convicted, or what do you make of the accusations against Sara Duterte? Let's just talk about the funds.
Yeah. Just a cursory reading of the complaint and of the articles mentioned there, we can see that all of this are actually far greater and far more serious than those accusations against those two officials. You yourself has mentioned that less offense. But because all of this boils down really, even if the accusations are not that grave, theoretically speaking, but there is this ground which is catch all, broad, and I'm talking about betrayal of public trust. And in fact, any individual, if I may be so simplistic about it, practically each of this individual article, if you examine closely and thinking about the overall effect of these actuations, of these behaviors, of these acts and omissions, each of this would already be a basis for betrayal of public trust, because public office is a public trust. She or he, the public official, is really expected to observe higher degree of conduct and disposition in leadership. So each of these can already constitute betrayal of public trust, on top of the other grounds of culpable violation of Constitution, graft and corruption, because some of these are actually basis for plunder later. If she gets impeached in the House and then convicted in the Senate, then she can be prosecuted for those crimes, for those offenses, whether grave offenses or less offenses.
All right.
Yes.
The office of the Vice President under Sara Duterte received confidential funds amounting to 500 million in 2023. And when she was simultaneously DepEd Secretary, she had, I believe, 150 million pesos in confidential funds. You were a senator and you approved the budget when there are requests for confidential funds, right? So I want to ask you first, I've always said it's also the fault of Congress that gave her these funds. Napakalaki ng binigay eh. Diba? Ang laki-laki ng binigay. Right?
Correct.
Kasalanan din ng Congress.
You're correct, Karen. They should have first determined whether those offices, both the DepEd and the OVP, deserve to get confidential funds in relation to their respective mandates. What confidential intelligence funds would OVP be requesting for when it's not vested with any duty about national security? And also DepEd, so both OVP and DepEd. And remember that the former VP Lenny Robredo never asked for confidential funds and was never given confidential funds because tama ka, Karen, no? The original sin came from Congress itself by giving Sara Duterte as VP and as DepEd Secretary confidential intelligence funds without examining and assessing the need for it in relation to the specific mandates of those two offices.
Oo. Para maintindihan ng publiko, no, there are confidential funds, there are intelligence funds. You were a senator that actually approved the budget during your term.
Yes.
What is the difference? Of course, we know, but it's important that the public understands the difference and what they are meant to be used for. Who should have these funds?
Actually, there's a thin line of distinctions between these two. Intelligence, of course, would refer to those offices that would need that are expected to do intelligence work, intelligence gathering and surveillance and all that, and that pertains to the law enforcement agencies as well as, of course, the armed forces of the Philippines, and even certain departments where there are units that would really are expected in relation to the mandate, even as a secondary mandate, to really go into that work, that kind of work, intelligence, fact gathering, surveillance, and also with respect to protection of certain confidential matters of the particular department. Now, confidential funds is broader because you see, there are offices or there are officers that are expected also to do certain work that may not be covered by the itemized budget, strictly speaking, that is subject to strict scrutiny by the auditors, by COA, but actually are expected to also be performed because of the nature of the functions of a particular officer or executive or head of a particular agency. Kaya nga siguro this situation na inahalungkat na at iniscrutinize na ng gusto yung budget ng OVP and DepEd during the stint of VP Sara, Congress now should be more discerning, and they about the need for confidential funds for each and every department or agency of government. So dapat this also serves as a wake-up call or a lesson for Congress as the one holding the power of the purse, that they cannot just be lightly giving out confidential intelligence funds to particular officials or particular departments without being convinced of the necessity for those funds.
Because the OVP and the DepEd are both civilian agencies. And is it
Yes.
correct? There are
Yes.
limitations. There are limitations on what you can spend confidential funds for. Is it really limited, attorney, because you were once Justice Secretary, only to gathering information, housing witnesses? Dun lang ba talaga limited ang confidential funds?
The way I see it, because I was a DOJ secretary,
Yeah.
confidential intelligence funds, for example, are needed in the witness protection program because you have to protect the witnesses and you have to have really safe houses for them.
Yes.
Di ba kaya nga nakakapagtaka sa OVP, may mga safe houses.
Yes.
And with the extravagant disbursements, how in heaven's name would an office of the vice president be needing safe houses? But in the case compared to the witness protection program, which is under Department of Justice, so necessarily it is justified also. Although basically, Department of Justice is a civilian agency. Also, offices like the Interagency Council Against Trafficking.
Cashback on dining, cashback on groceries, cashback on gas.
IACA.
Pwede
Now,
yun.
the DOJ secretary is the head of the IACAT. I was the head of the IACAT when I was DOJ secretary, and there was really need for confidential funds because you are actually there would be intelligence gathering, information gathering, and also the operations of the IACAT operatives, because IACAT has operatives to really look into and to really fight human trafficking.
Yeah.
So, may investigation rin. So, yun ang mga examples, Karen, of civilian agencies na even if they're not really strictly speaking, talking about or handling national security matters to confidential and at times intelligence funds, but not the OVP. And now, DepEd, I'm still trying to think what can be a good justification for the office of the DepEd, for the agency as such as the DepEd.
Oo. And you've made good points. And so it goes to show that, frankly, confidential funds that really you have Malacanang and Congress that are also partly to blame, that they have used confidential funds as for political discretion. It's political appeasement because these funds were given to Sara Duterte nung uniteam pa sila.
Exactly.
right? So at the
Yeah,
end
exactly.
of the day, yeah, it's the Filipino people. It's a loss for the Filipino people, the way the budget was handled.
Yeah, I agree with you, Karen. And that is why, the vice president now is crying foul. And then
Yeah.
her supporters are saying, why not open up all of this confidential intelligence funds and not just zero in and focus on the vice president? But as you, if the unit team is still as strong as before, would there be
Walang
such investigation?
investigasyon. Do you believe that? Yan ang tanong ko.
I doubt it.
Unity,
I d-
diba? Ito, mag-aminan tayo, kung unity pa rin si Pangulong Marcos at Sara Duterte, mahuhuli ba ang maling paggamit umano ng confidential funds ni Sara Duterte?
We very much doubt it. I don't think it would happen. Kung ano pa sila, intact pa yung kanilang alliance. But because of that, kaya naging na siya, subject to scrutiny. But does it mean that having all of these processes, the scrutiny being made in certain committees of the House of Representatives and even of Senate, does it mean that is not proper? Certainly not. I mean, certainly, that is not the right thing to say, that it is now becomes questionable or improper to scrutinize her actions, her record as VP, and then even as DepEd. So, and that is the very thinking also of the coalition of complainants, that just because there are other issues being raised against other high officials, it doesn't mean that we are precluded now from doing this, because ang nakikita natin ngayon ay yung mga naglalabasan sa mga hearings na yon. Maybe later there will be some basis to also initiate impeachment proceedings against other impeachable officials, whoever he is or whoever they are. But right now, since the focus is on the vice president, and since the facts are there, the evidence are there, the indications of the misconduct, the implications also of her misbehavior, especially those rants, those public meltdowns, we cannot just sit idly by. We cannot just turn deaf and blind to all of this. These are facts right there before us. And then we do not do something about it. What kind of a society are we? Just letting go of those malfeasance, those misconduct, those violations of the Constitution and the laws? Because she is really violating the Constitution and the laws. Because these institutions are created and protected also by the Constitution. That you cannot just really hit them, you cannot just insult them, you cannot just show disrespect to these institutions, even if these institutions are imperfect, because you are among the very high officials of the land. So your grave misconduct, the standards for good conduct are a lot higher than ordinary public employees or public officials.
All right. Okay.
So that's that. Okay.
Let's continue our discussion with former Senator Laila De Lima on the impeachment complaint filed against Vice President Sara Duterte. De Lima is one of the 17 complainants. So,
Karen, let me again correct you. I'm not a complainant. I did not sign the complaint. I was designated as a spokesperson.
All right. Wait,
Yes.
This is important. I'm happy that, because when you read the articles, it says you are a spokesperson, but it appears